Okay, now the clock is ticking. 4 days now, Arizona's illegal immigration law goes into effect. That's on Thursday of this week, unless we get a decision from a U.S. judge on whether or not the measure is constitutional. That decision could come at any time. The latest polling out of Arizona shows that 77% of those surveyed think that state and federal government should work together to secure the border. But a $700 million bill to address that problem just failed in the U.S. Senate. My next guest says she's furious about that. Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords is a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and welcome back here. What did the Senate decide on this?
Well, essentially what the Senate did is they said no to the hardworking ranchers who live along the Mexican border. They said no to the Border Patrol agents who are already there, and no to the National Guard that's going to be deployed in about a week. I can't believe that the Senate would not approve this critical funding now at a time when it's extremely important for those of us who live along the U.S.-Mexico border.
$700 million is a big chunk of change. What happens to security, do you think, without it?
Well, the problem was when the plan to deploy the National Guard took place, it was created so that it wouldn't happen in a vacuum. It's a ramp up, a protection essentially for when the Border Patrol adds an additional 1,200 guardsmen, plus about 1,000 new ICE agents, DEA agents as well, other like ATF agents, federal officers. So I think it really jeopardizes the deployment of the National Guard at this point. It's deplorable that with everything that they're doing over in the Senate, that they wouldn't at this time realize that we have to protect the U.S. citizens, particularly Southern Arizonans, with hundreds of thousands
cut
of illegals
through it a little bit.
through.
What do you think's behind it?
I think it's politics. I think that there's a lot to do with it. The fact that, and I serve on the Armed Services Committee. There's a lot going on, of course, with the United States military right now. But when we authorized the National Defense Bill, I think about the hundreds of billions of dollars that goes to protecting our interests in our country. But what about for Southern Arizona, with hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants coming in every single year? In fact, in my sector, the Tucson sector, from October 1st to where we are right today, over 180,000 apprehensions. And for every person that we apprehend, think about the people that get through that we never catch.
Listen, I think a lot of folks back in your home state agree with exactly what you're saying. We saw a poll that showed 55% favored that Senate bill that's now being debated before a judge in your state. But just reflect on what I mentioned as I was introducing you. 77% of people in Arizona think the state needs to work with the federal government. But what you're saying is that what the state wants, it's not getting at all from Arizona, despite this debate that's gone very public now for 6 months.
Yeah, this is a big debate, and one of the biggest positives I think about SB 1070 is that it finally woke up the federal government to what's been happening, particularly in southern Arizona, for a long period of time. Judge Susan Bolton is hopefully going to rule soon. The law will take effect on Thursday, and Arizonans are mad, and they should be mad. And by the actions or the lack of action by the United States Senate this week or this couple of days ago is absolutely deplorable.
What is your hunch on what that judge does, by the way? She heard the arguments on Thursday. A lot of protesters out there, not a sizable amount, but enough to get some media attention. Based on the arguments you've heard on the outside of court, what does she do?
Again, I just want to emphasize her reputation and how reputable she is. I'm not a lawyer. I can't guess, but my suspicion is that parts of the law will be upheld and parts of the law may be struck down.
So she's going to pick and choose then?
I think that's most likely.
Will that be satisfactory to you?
It depends on what she picks and chooses, right?
Yeah. I guess we'll find out eventually. And ultimately, when it goes into effect on Thursday, we have to check with the police departments in Arizona. They are the ones who are charged with enforcing this law. Thank you for your time today. $700 million not going to your state at the moment. Gabrielle Giffords, though, the Democratic Congresswoman back in Washington with us today. 18 minutes past. Juliet.